This is the Zentone 7 tube amp I'm selling. It has a complete tube signal path. The only difference between this and a regular tube amp is just that it has digital potentiometers which you can change and store as presets, and various internal switches which configure the amp in different ways, and you can store that as those as presets as well. Standard, standby power switch as you'd see on a normal tube amp. Gain control, bass, mid, treble controls, very similar standard tube tone stack, and then a master volume control. The difference is that you have push buttons. So these switches, these knobs you can push. For example, this push button, it changes the preamp gain structure. So you go from a clean to a drive to a lead type configuration. This push button puts you in low power mode, so you go from 300 volts across the tube. Low power mode, you have 150 volts across the tube. Bright switch, which is again similar to any standard tube amp bright switch. These are single-ended output tube amps, so that's why it's a 7-watt amp. It has a single output tube, but you can switch between an EL84 and a 6V6 tube by pressing this. So there's two different output tubes installed in here, and you can select which one you want to enable. And then for the output tubes, you can also go between pentode mode and triode mode. Triode mode is a little bit darker than pentode mode, but it gives you a bit of a different tone you may like. The presets, you can store up to 64 presets. Preset 0 is set to true bypass mode, which means the input coming in from the guitar or the line in goes directly to the line out in true bypass mode. The presets, you basically select what you want to change. You press it once, it'll start blinking, and then you press it again to store the preset. I'm not going to change that here. As I mentioned, this input can be the guitar input if you want to use it as a normal tube amp, or the way I use it, this is my effects loop input from my effects loop. So then on the back of the amp, I'll show in a minute, I have the output that goes back to the effects loop. This is the back of the amp, and you can see that there's a speaker output jack. You can configure that to be 4 or 8 ohms depending on the speaker cabinet you're using. There's a foot switch which can be used to cycle through the presets. A MIDI input which is used to either control which preset is active, or you can change parameters with MIDI commands as well. This is the line output. So this is a line level output. It comes directly from the output transformer. When you unplug the speaker output, it actually engages a reactive load that emulates a speaker loading the output transformer. So there's a reactive load built in here, and then this direct out is tapped off of that transformer, and you can set the level of that output feeding. The way I use it again is I feed this back to my effects loop in my modelers, which I'll show in a minute. As I mentioned, I like to set up my modeler. In this case I'm using my Helix, and putting the Zentone 7 in the effects loop. So you can see that I have, instead of an amp in this preset, I actually have an effects loop in an IR, so that you can actually configure various IRs depending on how you want to set up the cabinet. What I've done here is I have on my stomp box mode, I have a bunch of different settings that send MIDI messages to the Zentone. So if I go up here, you can see as I change the foot switch settings, it'll change the various presets on the Zentone itself. Then I can go to another snapshot mode where I can actually select various cabinets. So they're basically IRs, so I can select different IRs to be the cabinet behind the Zentone. So this is a way I can try out a lot of different tones. One thing you might want to do is basically pick your favorite preset that you like a lot with the effects and so forth. Replace the amp with the effects loop, and then replace the cabinet with an IR, or keep the cabinet. And that's a good way to get some nice tones.